Wow, we have some folks coming in from California. Nice, nice.
Hi, Hannah. It's great to see you. Hannah's a military spouse friend of mine and entrepreneurial rock star herself. So great to see Hannah here. Thanks for being here.
Nice, nice. We have both East Coast and West Coast today. So that's a great segue into kicking it off. So today is our founder spotlight with the amazing Tara Falcone, who is the founder and CEO of Reason. Before we get to the spotlight and the conversation that Tara will be having with Marty, I'm just going to introduce you all to the New York Tech Alliance and the New York Tech Meetup if this is your first time being a part of this community. So the New York Tech Alliance, the goal that we have here is driving access, equity, and inclusion in the New York Tech community, which is one of the most diverse and dynamic in the world. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we do at the New York Tech Alliance, you can go over to nytech.org. And my name is Georgianne Gettin, and I am the CEO and founder of GSD Solutions. I'm also a New York Tech Alliance board member. If you want to reach out to me, connect with me, feel free to add me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email if you have any questions. And you can follow the New York Tech Alliance on all social media at NYTech Alliance. So just as a privacy statement, we are recording this session. So we photograph, record, and audio record, video record and audio record or events to share important discussions with our experiences with folks that are unable to attend. So hey, everyone that's watching the replay. And if you would like to, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you head on over to YouTube, NY Tech Alliance there, as well as, again, on all social media. And if you're using the hashtag while you're paying attention to this session and you want to tweet something or Instagram share something, definitely use our hashtag NYTM. Another thank you to our sponsors, or amazing annual sponsors, various different organizations, big and small, including Northwestern Mutual, who is sponsoring and partaking in this event that we have today. If you want to learn more about our sponsors, head on over to nytech.org/sponsors. Our next upcoming event is going to be our annual or monthly tech meetup, the New York Tech Meetup. That's going to take place on July 22nd at noon. It is 100% online. So head on over to nytech.org/or_events in order to sign up as well as watch that event live. Just a quick information about how you can support the New York Tech Alliance. We're one of the largest as well as oldest meetup and associations around. You can add a donation when you RSVP to one of our virtual events. You can become an individual supporting or a corporate member of the New York Tech Alliance, as well as make a small donation. You can do that by heading over to nytech.org/support_NYTA. And every dollar counts, every bit of support counts, or even just sharing this event, sharing the material, the work that we do is always really appreciated. Oh, I think it's a good slide. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Marty, who will tell us a little bit about himself, as well as Northwestern Mutual, and just all the work that he's been doing, and then introducing and welcoming Tara. So Marty, it is on to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, I'll just do a quick introduction of myself, just for some context, but started my career as a designer, became an entrepreneur, and then had a few startups with a few exits, sold them to companies like Twitter and Eventbrite, Brex. So I've done a lot across the consumer social side, fintech, event tech, e-commerce, marketplaces. But now working with founders on the investment side. And so, when we talk about, companies like Northwestern Mutual and partnerships with organizations like the New York Tech Alliance, what we're often focused on are finding the best founders earliest in their journey, because we're primarily focused on the future. What will the world look like 3 to 10 years from now? What new possibilities will exist? What new consumer behaviors will be unlocked? And we're not shy to the fact that those big ideas and those big revelations, they're most likely going to come from founders. These two folks in your quintessential garage somewhere who have connected the dots in a way nobody else has, or see the patterns before anybody else has, and that's where the big insights are going to come from. And we know that there's no one central place where those ideas come from. They don't come from San Francisco. They don't just come from New York or Miami. They can come from all sorts of different neighborhoods, all sorts of founders at different types, at different stages in their lives. And so, a big part of Northwestern Mutual specifically and how it thinks about founders at the early stages is knowing, we have to be supportive of one, finding those founders, knowing that they can be in a diversity of places, but then, figuring out how we can be supportive of them. And we'll talk a little bit about that with Tara, but, everything from injecting to capital and being super founder friendly. So there's different outlets where there's some investments that are equity based, like traditional funding, and there's others which are non-dilutive, where it's more of like a research grant. And there's almost nothing more founder friendly than that, when you can simply just inject a founder with capital early. And then, if we can go one step further and, integrate them into something like Northwestern Mutual or a partner of ours, and that founder can have their first enterprise contract or their first relationship with a Fortune 100, that becomes, very meaningful and very powerful. But that's enough on me and sort of, what I'm looking for and what I'm doing. I'm really here to talk about Tara, and I'm really here to talk about, founders who are doing awesome and amazing things. And just by way of introduction, I do find sometimes we get a little hung up on the word startup, and we don't often, I think we do ourselves a disservice where we don't take one step back. And what I want to often talk about is start outs. I think every founder has a different start out. And I think that's probably the most important place to align yourself with another founder when you're either looking up to them or looking to them for advice. It isn't what they're building or how they're building it. It's who they are and where they are in their journey. If we're talking about a founder who has been through it for 2 decades, has a dozen exits under their belt, has a big, bankroll of disposable income, that's a lot different than a founder who's right out of undergrad, comes from a low income family, has no savings, has no life insurance. Like that's a harder journey and a more of an uphill battle. So, I always like to take, one step back and talk to the founder themselves and, where are they in their journey right now? Where are they starting up? What's their position? And often, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but there's powers of strength in there. The 22-year-old with no bank account, they can work harder, longer hours than the 45-year-old that's maybe saved for a bit over the years, who's, now back starts to hurt when they're sitting in the office chair past 9 p.m. So there are advantages and disadvantages. But Tara, let me throw it back to you. Tell us a little bit more about you, where you are in this journey, and then where are you coming from when you're starting your business?
Yeah, thank you. It was a great lead up. And honestly, I feel slightly attacked by that back comment. I recently turned 33. And I feel it every morning, especially in the probably far too cheap office chair that I do sit in. I need to invest in like some ergonomic thing. But yeah, I think I like this idea of start out, because I do think that, startup life is very glamorized by VC culture and, in college, and like, oh, I'm going to, not work, and I'm going to go straight into building something and eat ramen and sleep on the floor of my office and whatever. And, that's not necessarily, realistic or the reality for other people who are building, venture backable businesses like myself. So I grew up in a very low income family in rural Michigan. Due to some family situations, I've been largely financially independent since I was about 14 years old. I made $2.65 an hour as a waitress plus tips, like just to get by. And then I went to Yale on a
just so people know context. We're talking about $2.65.
Yes, $2.65 an hour. Like I got paid every 2 weeks. My check after taxes was like $60. So I relied on tips, and even back then could really feel the impact of like, a 50-cent change in gas prices, for example. So so I was barely getting by through high school, but I worked really hard, and I ended up getting a full need-based financial aid scholarship to Yale University, which was, will probably be the greatest gift, ever that I'll receive in my life. Of course, in addition to the funding from Venture City and Northwestern Mutual, but yeah. And so, I went through college thinking I was going to go to medical school. I got to the end of my senior year, realized I couldn't afford to apply to medical school. I also didn't want to go to medical school anymore for a myriad of reasons. And there was this whole industry focused on money, which had stressed me out my entire life. And I was like, well, I'm the only person in my family that has this opportunity, this upward social mobility to learn about money, to break that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle I had grown up in, and actually change the financial trajectory of my family for decades to come, centuries to come, I hope. So 3 months before graduation, got a job on Wall Street, had absolutely zero business being there. I had taken microeconomics and that was about it, but I was hungry to learn what they did. And that's what they saw. So I started my career in finance as a long-short equity analyst at a small boutique hedge fund in New York City. Turns out I loved the work. I had no idea that you could put your money to work to make more money. I grew up thinking you had to trade your time for dollars, meaning like an hour for $2.65 as a waitress. So I was just fascinated by this, you could put money in, smart investment decisions, hopefully, and turn it into more money without having to actually work any more than just, your brain. But over time, because of my background, I felt really disconnected to the wealthy clientele that I was serving. Coincided with my now husband left Wall Street to join the Navy. I knew we were going to be moving around a lot, and that, with military spouse unemployment rates being over 20%, that it was highly unlikely that I was going to be able to continue my high finance career as we were getting moved every 2 years. And I really wanted to create something on my own. I wanted to create something for retail investors because that's what I was passionate about. But this was in 2015, before, retail investing took off like it did in the last couple of years. And so I kind of just left knowing that I would figure it out. I'd been resourceful my whole life, moved to Japan with my husband at the end of 2015 and started kind of experimenting. And I guess we can start there. It led to a first product, which we actually created in 2016, which is the personal finance course for college students I wish I had had. It's called Lit. And so that was kind of my playground for entrepreneurship. I built that, bootstrapped it myself from 2018 to now. And then in 2020, I saw my opening in the market to create something for retail investors. And that has led us to what is now Reason and how you and I connected, Marty.
Yeah. And so, what year did Lit start again?
So I saw the need for it in 2016. I started creating it at the end of 2017 when we got back to the States. And then we launched with 3 schools, including Yale, at the end of 2018.
Okay. Now, I think it kind of speaks a little bit towards, why we connected and where we saw a lot of value and potential, at least even just conversationally before we got into sort of what you're building with Reason, which we'll talk a little bit about. But it was that, before we have meme stocks on Reddit and before fractional shares on Robinhood or on everybody's cell phone, you knew that there's a big trend coming, that there's a younger demographic that's going to get much more into the fintech world, for better or worse, and they're going to go into it. If that does happen, they're probably going to go into it ill prepared. And I think we're even seeing that a little bit now, even people who are not Gen Z millennials, maybe feeling a little ill prepared with a recession that they hadn't been exposed to in their career lifetime, at least. And so you started thinking about like, hey, how do I get in front of that? And so there's some other stuff that we saw that I think we're going to talk about when we talk about Reason. So I'll have you kind of explain to us what Reason is and why does it exist. But what attracted us to what you were building was that we also are looking towards where's the world going, or the Gretzky quote, skate to where the puck will be, not where it's at. And we knew that there's a growing necessity for understanding how your finances work, but it's getting harder and harder to see further out. Even pre-pandemic, it's getting harder to plan for retirement. It's getting harder to know what my life will look like 5 years from now. It's getting harder to know where I'm going to work 5 years from now. I think for a lot of people, it's probably hard for them to know where they're going to be employed 2 years from now. It's probably hard for them to know where they're going to geographically live 2 to 5 years from now. I think there's, COVID has definitely been an accelerant to this, but, with the Great Resignation, we're seeing a lot of job switching. We just see a lot of consumer trends that are accelerating at a rate that is faster than ever before. Whereas before it was generational, and we saw these changes, every 10 to 15 years. Now we're seeing big shifts, big changes happen, in several months, like 18 to 24 months, 36 month changes. And so one of the things that you had talked about was this concept of goals-based investing, which we thought was super clever because we'd started to see some trending where I can't figure out how to plan for a world when I'm 65, but I am thinking about my first house. But my first house won't be my last house. I'll convert it into an investment. And now it also seems like everything's an investment. My sneakers are an investment. My hats are an investment. My art is an investment. Everything has some kind of value. But let me stop there. Let me throw it over to Reason. And then, this is where you and I connect, and you're like, Marty, yes, this is the future. Well, it's not the future. It's the present, because I'm building it. But tell us what you're building.
Yeah, well, I'll just a kind of another point on lit specifically, and why I wanted to start there. I think that, especially in the military community and in my life in general, this idea of uncertainty and not knowing what's next, and where you're going to be and when you're going to be there and what options will be available to you, feels like things that are out of your control. But the one thing that is in your control is how much you know about finances, and the more that you know about how to manage your own finances, the more agile you can be with the decisions that you make, and the more planning that you can do ahead of time to make sure that you do have those decisions. So creating Lit was really about establishing that foundation of core personal finance principles for people, so that they could achieve whatever it is they wanted to achieve in life, to recognize that they're in the driver's seat of their own personal financial situation, regardless of what life will send their way. And so that was really kind of why I wanted to start there. But then Reason sort of came about, interestingly, in 2020. Between Wall Street and Reason, I became a certified financial planner while we were stationed in Japan. And so I was really goals focused thinking. If somebody were to come to me as somebody looking for financial planning, or if you were to go to a financial planner, where they will start with you always is, well, what do you want? What do you want to achieve? What are you trying to get to? And so in 2020, seeing all these people dive into Robinhood and Webull and Coinbase and all these other companies, started talking to people and just asking, okay, well, why are you doing this? What is motivating you to put your capital at risk in this very self-directed way, right? Meaning choosing individual securities, stocks, crypto, et cetera, that, historically, the personal finance community has kind of told you not to do. They've sort of said, oh, just buy ETFs and index funds and ride them for decades, and you'll become a millionaire. So I was really curious, what was motivating people to do this? And I was fascinated to discover that so many people, as you sort of mentioned, are investing for goals that are shorter term than retirement. They're, buying certain stocks or crypto or individual ETFs in hopes of buying, or building a home down payment so they can buy a house in 3 to 5 years. Or maybe they want to buy a vacation home at some point, or they want to, feel less guilty about certain expenses in their life, like the coffee habit. They want to buy coffee at Starbucks once in a while, and, screw Susie Orman for telling them that they shouldn't do it. All these kinds of things, and things that are much shorter term than retirement. And I was like, all right, well, how are those goals that you're investing for very actively, how are they dictating the investments that you're buying? And because they don't have the financial knowledge or, educational background, the answer was always, oh, I have no idea. I'm just buying, fractional shares in 70 different companies based on what this, guy is tweeting about, or I see on Instagram, or, companies are telling me to do, and hoping that one of them goes to the moon and I become a millionaire and never have to worry about money again. And I was like, all right, that's not the strategy. And then the last question I would ask is, well, how are you tracking any of this? Because now, it's this interesting double-edged sword. It's like, well, fintech has made, fractional investing and investing in anything, right? Like you said, literally anything now can be an investment. It's made it very easy to get into these things, but with the more options you have, the harder it is to track all of this. And so I'd ask, how are you tracking any of this? And, a couple people would say, I've made a very detailed spreadsheet that kind of sucks. I have to manually update it all the time. And but at least it allows me to see, oh, I own these things for this particular reason, or I own these things for this other reason, rather than just a, long laundry list of securities when I open my Robinhood account. But most people were just, kind of mentally accounting. So, during the pandemic, there were all these offers to, open this account and get a free stock, or open this account and get some free crypto. So people have 5+ accounts that they've opened and funded. And they're just opening all of those, once a day, once a week, whatever it might be, mentally accounting, summing how much they have across those accounts. And then they're taking it one step further, which is to say, and I know, a third of this is earmarked for this goal, half of it's for this other goal, and the rest is for, X, Y, or Z. And interestingly, it's just kind of funny how life works in full circle. It reminded me of when I was on Wall Street still, 2013, I believe it was. And John, my now husband, came to me and said, I have this much money saved for your engagement ring, but the one I want to buy you is more expensive. Are there any stocks or anything that I should invest my ring fund in to be able to afford the ring I want to buy you? And I was a female investment analyst who did this for a living. So of course, I had some ideas about what he should, invest this money in, so that I could get a beautiful engagement ring. And I sent him back then what is now the super rudimentary prototype for Reason, which was a simple spreadsheet of 5 to 10 different companies I had researched, my price target for each, my thesis for each. And he was able to simulate, like play around with different potential allocations. Okay, if I were to buy this much of stocks A, B, and C, it might get me this close to my goal, presuming that she's right about how high these stocks might go. Or if I buy this much of X, Y, and Z, it could get me closer to my goal or even, overshoot how much I need. And so over the course of a year, we doubled his ring fund. I got a beautiful engagement ring out of it. And I think a very, empowering story to tell for a woman, young woman who had previously felt very excluded from the financial world, to have learned in a pretty short amount of time how to harness it for my benefit for a very particular purpose, very particular reason, was really transformative. And so that's where the idea for Reason came from, was like, all right, rather than just having an account that holds, all these different investments, we need to provide people the ability to actually assign investments to specific goals, and then actually, down the line, be able to more easily transact once they have accumulated enough in assets. And that's what Reason will allow you to do, is allowing you to do. Our beta testers are already doing it.
Some of the themes I heard in there, and it kind of speaks to some of the questions that were coming through in the chat, where, with a lot of these banks and especially with some of the newer fintechs, it's kind of hard to know, who to trust, what to trust. And what I'm hearing here thematically is that, I don't know if we can solve that problem, but what we can do is, have better, stronger financial literacy. And you had mentioned this earlier in your conversation, more control over your own finances, then, the trust just becomes you empowering yourself, knowing what to do and how to do it. And also, some folks had talked about, like, some of these banks have some of this goals-based investing. And my fear with a lot of this is that it's like the spirit is right, but they're still missing like who this audience is, like what they're, I don't think they're realizing, and you're realizing this, but like my goal isn't always retirement or a house, these like the big five, like binary things. Like my goal might be, or because like a car is another popular one, 529 plan for college is a popular one, but a surfboard, getting my next Peloton, things like that might be my goal. I might be saving for a new mountain bike. And, again, seems a little arbitrary now that like, well, it's a big difference between a $300,000 home and an $800 mountain bike. But when we talk about a world where, we live in fractional shares and, like now even like our goals-based investing becomes a little bit more fractionalized. And one thing I'll throw to you here is, and when I think about startups and how to build them and grow them, another place where we get hung up is, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but is talking about the customer. We always talk about the customer. Customer is very important. But one thing that I like to do as a creative exercise, and I'm throwing you for a loop here, so I'll give you a second, and I'll tell a little backstory because I didn't tell you this one earlier. But I like to always know who's your customer's customer, who's on the other side of this transaction. So if my customer is a mom who's buying groceries for her family, the customer's customer is the kid that wants, the cereal and the cereal with the fun cartoon character on it. So we have to understand, who's that mom and who she's buying for. And so there's always a customer's customer at the end of some transaction. There's somebody, and maybe for your husband when he was in, saving for that ring, like his customers, his fiance or his wife. Yeah, exactly. And so ultimately, we've got to figure out how to, you're a part of that customer journey, and that gets lost oftentimes, that there's this customer's customer. And one of the, again, while you think about if you don't already know who your customer's customer is, I'd be curious. When we were fundraising, people would often say to us, and this is we can talk about fundraising too, because that's a fascinating and frustrating journey for founders. But we would always get hung up with, that sounds like a better mousetrap. And I always got annoyed with that. It's like, no, what I'm doing is new and innovative. It's groundbreaking. And they're like, oh no, we've seen this before. And it's like, well, I thought about the better mousetrap for a little bit. And I thought about for a second, what if I were to build a mousetrap? What would be my goal? My goal would be to sell that mousetrap to somebody that has a mouse problem. This is somebody who wants to dispose of mice. They want to kill the mouse. And that means that my mental model would be very anti-mouse because my customer is pretty anti-mouse. But that mental model is going to lock me out of a lot of things. What if at the end of all of this, I don't need a better mousetrap? I don't need to kill the mouse. What if all I really needed was better cheese? And what I really needed to do was attract the mouse, right? And then once I've attracted the mouse, I can figure out what to do with it and how to maybe capture it and release it and be more humane with it, if that's my intention. But, maybe I don't just go straight with like killing the mouse. Maybe, I can create better cheese. And so I always think about that. It's like, okay, maybe I'm not doing a mouse trap at all. Maybe what I'm really doing is better cheese. And then maybe it's not the person who's buying the mouse trap that I'm building for. Maybe it's the mouse that I'm building for. So back to reason, who do you think's on the other side of that transaction? I think it's an easy one with you and your fiance. What about some of the other customers that you've had come through the platform? And then as a follow-up to that, tell us about some of these users, give us the age range and sort of what some of the things that they're trying to save for.
Yeah, there's a lot packed in there. I will say, so the surfboard example comes from my husband. He, not happy about it now, but he was investing in crypto to buy a new surfboard. And interestingly, the customer was actually me, because he was like, oh, I think I'm going to I want a new surfboard. I was like, okay, well, go on Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp. There's so many used ones that are in great condition you could get for a good price. He's like, I really want like a new one. I was like, all right, well, make up the difference. Right? Like invest, like we did with my ring fund, like invest to, make up that difference, because you could buy one in cash right now, a used one. But if you want something, a new fandangled one, then earn it. Figure out a way to make that happen. And so, yeah, he, came home one day and he was like, darn it, Tara, I could add my surfboard. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, my crypto spiked overnight. By the time I saw my phone, it had gone back down, and, I no longer had enough for my surfboard. And so that kind of like cascaded into the next bigger vision thinking of like, oh, well, what if, we could have, sold your crypto at a certain price for you? What if we could have bought your surfboard for you? Like, so that those things then become automated after the fact. And so I think, customer, interestingly, and funnily enough, like all of Wall Street allegedly says they're trying to figure this out. Oh, and that's my dog Rocco in the background. He's also a customer's customer, depending on what it is that we're doing. I ultimately think it's women. So Reason is not exclusively for women, but it is very intentional. It's a very organized kind of platform. And it's meant to, allow people to invest with purpose, which I think just kind of plays into the female psyche a lot more. There's also this other aspect of it that like women ultimately, even though maybe in the United States, unfortunately, men earn more money, I think especially in like male-female relationships, women ultimately have sort of like final decision power over the money. We sort of manage the money, especially in like military communities, as I'm a part of, and I know a couple other people here are. It ultimately comes down to the women. And then depending on which goal you're investing for, it'll either be your spouse, or it could be your kids, it could be your dog, it could be your in-laws, for example. Like we're investing for a house so that we can hopefully get my in-laws to come out to New Jersey and be able to help with children when we have them in some time in the future. So there's a lot of different customers that we're kind of seeking to serve here. But I do think that we are really leaning into something that other goal-based investing platforms or people or companies, banks, whatever, that have made it kind of like an aside or like an ancillary product, has not been able to tap into yet. And I think that is what's going to make us very different and make us very successful, is that we're looking at the landscape right now and thinking, okay, so all this access has been unleashed. Like that's fantastic. People can now trade stock, crypto, buy an NFT, whatever it might be, at the palm of their hand very quickly. But what does that mean? Why are they doing it? How can we make it impactful and purposeful for the end user so that, again, they feel as though they're in control of this action that they're doing and that they're increasing the likelihood of a positive outcome for themselves? And so I think there's, a lot in that. And then I will say that it's funny because I recently spoke to the co-founder of a very large fintech company, a very successful fintech company. And they were like, oh yeah, we've kind of polled our, 5 million user base about goal-based investing. And they don't really seem to be super interested in it. And I'm like, well, we're targeting very different audiences. Like you are a robo-advisor that people come to abdicate that responsibility to. Like somebody, creates an account with a robo-advisor because they don't want to pick their investments themselves, right? So we are looking to serve people who want to be actively involved in choosing those investments, either because they want to feel as though they're picking things that have an impact, that they, for ESG purposes, or they just have some connection to that company or crypto, or, they, want things organized in pretty little boxes in their investment account, or whatever their reason might be. We're targeting incredibly different audiences. And so I think it's just really interesting that the fintech space is either we're going to just take control over, we don't think that you're capable of doing this yourself, which is the robo-advisor model. Or it's, you can choose and trade all day, all that you want, but like, we're not going to provide you any sort of context to it, which is the Robinhood model. And we sit kind of in the middle saying like, there's the best of both worlds, and we're going to provide that to the customer in a way that nobody else is doing right now.
No, that's awesome. Because I often get frustrated when it seems like when folks look at the world, everything has to be binary. It has to be one or the other, right? You have absolutely no control, or it's pure chaos. Like, you know, there can be, you know, something in the middle there. And I have to find that that's where some of this, you know, genius, big ideas and breakthroughs end up happening. As a little bit of a segue, because I touched on fundraising before, but let's talk about it, because I also think, you know, when we talk about the difference between men and women on home financers, there's a big difference there. You had alluded to earlier, because the fact that, you know, men get paid more than women, just, you know, within the U.S., you know, definitely significantly more. But like, what about on the fundraising side? You know, as a female founder, you know, how are you finding the fundraising process? How are you finding the startup process? I mean, you've got a finance background. But do you feel like people still don't take you seriously when we talk about money? Is this a man's game, and only men know how to do Wall Street? And, you know, what could you possibly know? Is it getting ridiculous things like that?
You might see the pit bull side of Tara come out here in a second. I'll try to keep it diplomatic. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Marty, for being a champion for founders in general, but specifically for me. I think you've been one of the most like supportive investors that I've met along my journey. And I have not felt, you know, any sort of like issue with, you know, my being a female founder or anything, whatever. You've just been supportive, period, you know, at end of story. And so I thank you for that. I mean, I'll be honest, I'll never know necessarily if, like, you know, a certain conversation I had with an investor, you know, didn't end up or didn't result in an investment, you know, because they didn't take me seriously, or, you know, what the real impetus is there. But like, and I'm not one to like to think that that is a handicap or anything. I've never really let that slow me down. I mean, I used to be, you know, give you some interesting background. When I worked on Wall Street, you're sort of told to wear like a gray suit, a black suit, you know, kind of like, you know, keep it like, you know, super professional, whatever. But I was like, well, that's boring. And, you know, I'm a, you know, young blonde woman at these conferences in a sea of men. I want to stand out so that I can meet these management teams, so that I can get FaceTime with these people. Right. So I started wearing like bright colored dresses to all of these conferences. And guess who, you know, made her way to the front of the crowd to shake the CEO's hand or CFO's hand and get those calls and ask how their wife's doing, their kids doing. Right. So I always tried to use my being, you know, a woman in this industry to my strengths, and to leverage that as an asset that I had that, you know, the sort of rest of the industry did not.
Can I just real, because I want to stay on that point, because I think this is a big one. And it's sometimes it's hard to talk about, especially if I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of an underrepresented group that I'm not a part of, because, you know, who am I to speak on that? But I often find that, you know, in a David and Goliath kind of scenario, you've got to figure out, you know, whatever the perceived whatever's out there that is slowing you down or holding you back, or the world kind of feels like it's against you. Is there a way to turn that around and turn it into an advantage, right? Like, you're working in an environment, at least the story that I'm hearing you tell right now, where there's significantly more men than women. And so that makes it harder for you to, I would assume, get into this, you know, built-in boys club that's probably, you know, existed for hundreds of years. But also being one of very few women, which is the thing holding you, could hold you back. You've looked around and said, oh, well, this will be also the thing that helps me stand out. And so when there's, you know, 12 of the exact same white guys standing up there, you're going to look a little different, and people might remember you a little bit more. And then obviously you have to have, you know, the intellect and, you know, the knowledge and the conversation acumen to make it last. But like, you can use the perceived disadvantage as an advantage in this case. And I think even in startups, I want to do that. I don't want someone to say, oh, I can't do X, Y, Z because I'm based in the Midwest. I have to move to San Francisco. Like, I even get annoyed when someone tells me they need the latest, greatest Apple laptop to, you know, work in. I can do anything with a $129 Acer computer from Walmart. You know, and there's a lot of free software out there. Like those little things don't have to hold you back. And it's hard to turn that into an advantage. But I do feel like, you know, again, I grew up in a relatively low income household as well. And my mom teaches me all my scrappiness. I learned how to, make a meal out of next to nothing in a refrigerator, but like that translates into my founder. Like I don't have to read Lean Startup. I've lived Lean Startup. I know how to, I remember on Shark Tank once they talked about this thing called ramen profitability, where you basically live so cheap that you just eat ramen noodles for dinner. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's just called my 20s. Like, I know about ramen profitability, but I think it helps us become, when I think of all the attributes that I'm after, like intelligence is always great, but I want cleverness. I want somebody who can see the alternate way to do things or to get something done, or to look around at all of the little that I have, but compile it together to turn it into something that I can get momentum on. Because then after that, it's just going to be these words can be weighted sometimes, but your grit, your hustle, your ability to go out there and make of it what you will with what you have.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'm still rocking a 2015 MacBook. So, that comes from my, my background of like, it's still, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like it still works. It makes loud noises, but it gets the job done. I think what's important to recognize when it comes to, thinking about, any perceived disadvantages or being underrepresented group or whatnot is like, there's only so much, unfortunately, that I think is within the founder's control. So as you mentioned, I can change the way that I look. I can, make sure that I'm speaking intelligently. I can prepare for all of these meetings. I can be the best founder that I can possibly be. But unfortunately, there are some systemic structural issues, I think, in the, investing industry that will, until the pipeline on their side, right? Because it's kind of this dual-sided marketplace, till the pipeline on their side starts to shift and more representation is in that industry as well. I think underrepresented founders can sort of only do so much. So, I've been told by female venture capitalists who are, in my alumni network, so should be the friendliest of friendlies, that, sorry, Tara, like this is a great idea. And if you were a man and, or you just came from, you just had a successful exit, or you came from PayPal or like any of these other places, I could put you in front of our investment committee tomorrow. But unfortunately, the bar is higher for you as a female founder. We want you to, come back to us when you've built a product. And then it's, we build the product and then we come back to them and they're like, we need to see more user growth. We want to see some, revenue, et cetera. And it just feels like the boxes that I have to check for investors as a female founder. And again, I try not to think that this is the problem, but I've been told from female VCs that this is why, is that, I'm a female founder. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, investors just, I think, can't see a hard-charging, blonde, white, ambitious woman as the, CEO running a billion-dollar fintech company, because there aren't really any of them, right? It's like you look to see what else is out there and whether that fits your mental model. There's only one woman that I can think of that runs a fintech company, and that's Sally Krawcheck, who runs Ellevest. And you look at how that company has done compared to some of their peers in the market, and it, for certain reasons, hasn't necessarily done as well as, say, Betterment, for example. So I do think there's plenty that's within my control, but unfortunately there are certain things that are not, that has made fundraising difficult. I also think that the market has just shifted. I think that what's expected of a pre-seed company today, would have been more of like a seed expectation 5 years ago. And so just the amount of like traction and proof of concept and like early signs of product market fit that early stage investors want to see has also just compounded that. And I think it's made, fundraising as a female founder very challenging, which is why, programs like what you all are doing are so important.
No, that's awesome. So tell us what's next for Reason. Where are you on your journey? Like, what is it? Private beta? Is it going to get released soon? Can we all get in and play with it? Who's the target audience as well?
Yeah, so we launched private beta at the end of January with about 40 to 50 people, and they were super active in the beginning, like giving us loads of feedback because it was like true MVP. It was like the minimum core stuff that this app needs to do to validate that people actually do want to view their investments in these very, in this very particular way, meaning like assigned to specific goals. And so loads of great feedback. We've spent a lot of time iterating on that. We kind of went heads down, getting our actual account integration done so that that you can connect all of your existing investment accounts to Reason, and you can actually see everything in real time that you own, and, you know, strategically assign things without actually having to move any of your money. So we've been kind of heads down for the last few months. We just launched or released that kind of beta 2 update to that private beta crowd recently. We're getting some feedback from them now. And actually we're planning a public launch, meaning it will be in the App Store in July, hopefully within about 3 to 4 weeks is the goal. And so it's coming along. It'll be ready for you to play with very shortly. And who we're targeting, I think, you know, if you think of sort of who you're targeting for customers as like a bullseye, when you're starting out as a startup, you really want to focus on that core center, because those concentric circles can come later, but ultimately you need to be building for like one specific type of person so that it can direct both your, you know, build, but also your marketing messaging, your branding, et cetera. And so when we're looking at that bullseye, we, based on, you know, surveys and research that we've done with Northwestern Mutual, actually have kind of narrowed in on this niche of self-directed investors, meaning they're picking stocks, crypto, NFTs, et cetera. They're not just, you know, choosing ETFs for retirement, but self-directed investors in their 30s, because those are people who are kind of, you know, in a certain stage of their career, earning income, et cetera, who are investing for specific financial goals. And the top ones on Reason right now are a house, home down payment, child fund, baby fund, engagement ring, wedding, and travel. And actually a car is really high too. There were a number of Teslas. People really wanted an electric vehicle. And so basically self-directed investors in their 30s who are investing for these very particular reasons are those that we are leaning into. And actually, if we go even one step further, so narrowing that bullseye even more, people who are already using a spreadsheet to do something like this or to track this kind of information, we believe that if we put Reason in front of them, they should say yes 100% of the time to signing up and using the app. So we feel pretty confident in that, but until we actually get in the App Store and we start focusing marketing dollars on that demographic and seeing what the conversion rates really look like, we won't really know. Like, that's kind of a part of the fun and frustration of building a startup, is like, you can have all these theses, but until you test them, and sometimes testing them requires money, you won't actually know. But it's always, you know, you just got to constantly keep a beat on, you know, your data, your analytics, your KPIs, and make sure that, you know, the dollars that you're throwing at things are being effective. So
let's talk about those dollars for a second, because I know we're running out of time. So this might be the last question. You know, as an investor myself, I know that the true value isn't just the money that gets invested into the startup. So, you know, so from your perspective, you know, especially even working with groups like ours, you know, where have you found, you know, the biggest value add? And to any, you know, aspiring entrepreneurs in the group, you know, what should they be looking for? They shouldn't, I would think you would tell them the same advice. They don't just go chase a check, you know, find a partner, but like, what are real value adds that you think have either been helpful to you so far, or that you still kind of look and seek out to help you move forward?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something, frankly, that I've only really learned by having lots of conversations with people, by working with certain people, and just coming to understand that, like, you know, oh, this type of person can just provide so much more to us right now than just a check than this other person could. And just to, you know, circle back on the story, like, you know, I learned very early at a very young age how to stretch a $20 bill way further than you should be able to stretch one. So like, I've been bootstrapped up until this point, you know, up until we started working with you all. And so like, you know, I can make money last as long as I need to. Of course, it will run out at some point, but I think I'm pretty solid at doing that. So what I look for instead, or what I've found is super valuable, are former operators like you, Marty, people who have built companies before, who, you know, understand what the founder is going through, understands the challenges at each stage of a business, because those challenges change a lot dramatically as you start to scale. And so people, you know, finding people that you can lean on that can help you at the specific stage of business that you're in, because they either have, you know, personal experience doing that, or they just have some kind of expertise with that, or their network is really good at that, I think is really important. And so, you know, right now at our stage, like, because of my finance background, I actually don't think that we necessarily need, you know, mentors with, you know, or investors with loads of fintech experience. I think I've got that covered well enough for the current stage that we're in. When we start to expand and, you know, get deeper into our big vision, I'm definitely going to need some help, you know, from people who have, like, you know, broker dealer experience, payment experience, like some of these other things. But right now, I think I've got that covered. What I've never done before, though, is scaled a company, hired a team, like, started to create a go-to-market strategy and identify, your lowest cost of acquisition channels. Like I've never done any of that, specifically B2C. Like our other product is B2B, which is a very different marketing strategy. And so, yeah, so, working with you especially has been so helpful, because like, there's just one thing you told me to do last year that was like low cost, but high impact, which was, oh, Tara, like, these prototypes that you've designed, which like get the point across, but like, they're not super sexy. Like go find a UX designer who can take what you've created and make it look like $1 million fintech app, who has experience, doing that, and, pay them a couple $1,000s to do that. And that will completely change, the deck, how you're telling the story, what you're putting in front of investors. And such that simple thing that I did, now a year ago, completely transformed, I feel like, everything. It, the screens looked so amazing that I had to redesign the rest of the deck because it made the deck look terrible in comparison. So that was fun. That was work I didn't expect to have. But now the deck looks great. And so when I'm, it's just all a constant, step forward. And I think entrepreneurs need to find those people who are going to be able, especially in the early days, give them actionable things to do that are low cost, that will have a big impact, to just keep making, big strides forward. And you'll be shocked to discover how much progress you can make, and the magnitude of those small steps, what they end up having over the course of a year. For example, like I was looking at my,
you know a lot about compounding. So,
well, exactly. Yes. It's the compounding effects of all of these small things. It's like putting money into your investment account every month. It ends up, over time having a big impact. And I think that that's really the case with, whether it be investors, mentors, advisors, et cetera, that you'd be looking for to work with, or the early days of a startup, are find those people that can give you actionable tips. Like lip service is one thing. Like they can, oh, go do this. This might be a good idea, et cetera. Give me real things to do, and I will do them because I execute. My husband calls himself the ideas guy, and then he calls me the executioner, which like sounds kind of morbid. But that's what I do. I just like get stuff done. And so give me like real actionable things to do. Let me do them and come back to you and like report back about, how they went. We can debrief and then figure out, what direction we're going to take from there. So find the operators that know what to do, tell you things to do them, and then keep working with those people as we have continued to work together.
Yeah. For anybody on the call, what my advice on that design was, because I started my career as a designer, so it's near and dear, but it really comes down to the old advice that we'd always heard: dress for the job you want, not the job you had. So, and the last thing I'll say before I throw it back to Georgie is, because you alluded to this also, Tara, is that it's important for us to remember as founders, especially at the early stage, that the company, don't get so far ahead of yourself that you try to build who you're going to be 5 years from now. Realize that you're going to change over time, and then the company's going to change. And this is a hard one to swallow, but some of the folks that you bring on your team, you need them today for who you are and where you're at. You might not need those same people if they don't grow as the company grows 5 years from now. Like if you look at Netflix, when they first started, it was a bunch of people in a warehouse putting basically DVDs and envelopes and mailing them out. That's a completely different skill set than a streaming company with their own unique media distribution. Like those are completely different companies. So the people that had mastered the last mile supply chain of DVD mailing are not the same people that are going to be there to take them into original content and becoming this digital empire and going after Disney. But so let me stop there. Let me throw it back to Georgie, because I know we're going to run out of time.
Can I make one comment about that really quick? Because this is actually something we went through recently. So when we first started building the app at the end of last year, we had kind of a quartet. There was a part-time UX designer that helped with like initial strategy, but then it was just a trio. And this kind of called ourselves the Three Musketeers. It was me, a developer, and then a project manager. And in the beginning, we really needed that project manager to keep track of everything, to make sure the requirement stock was up to date, so that like, what the dev was building, it was very obvious like what he needed to do. And so that I could be focused on like, big vision and speaking to investors and all this kind of stuff. But then we recently got to the stage where it's like, okay, well, the app like exists now. There's of course new features we want to build, but like the core foundation is here. And sort of she and I both realized like, oh, there's just not as much for her to do right now. Like, as she was super busy before, but there's just not as much here left. And, she was early in her project management career as well. And so she was like, I want to learn more from like other project managers and kind of like maybe, figure out what I can do. And, that way I can provide more value to you down the future, et cetera. And so it just kind of made sense that like we had to kind of part ways, or she kind of bounced off of the project because she was really necessary, 7 months ago. But recently sort of became that role just became less necessary. And now, a role that is going to be more necessary is like a growth lead and another engineer to keep building out the features. And so that's a really hard, if you're like a nice person from the Midwest who cares about other people's feelings like I do, that's a hard thing to deal with, I think, for some founders early on. But, it's important to just recognize that like, you can't take it personally. It's nothing that you did or didn't do. It's just the, startup life, and that it isn't necessarily the right environment at the right time for certain roles. And your job as a CEO is to make sure that, your capital is being allocated where it needs to be. And so sometimes you have to make those, difficult decisions about, who needs to be on the team when, and that of course is going to shift over time. Like you said, when you're going from mail and DVDs to having a massive streaming company. So just wanted to share that little nugget.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so true. And I really enjoyed the conversation that you both shared today, just about, allocating resources, being an executioner. I personally call myself an execution strategist. Like that is my title. And so, it's not as scary as it sounds, because we really get stuff done, and just how you can use different resources, whether it be people, tools, or things that are out there to maximizing your capacity. And some of the opportunities or life experiences that we may go through that may seem like it's, taking us a step back, it's actually setting us up with the skill set, the mindset, and the abilities to take that step forward and scale our companies or businesses and grow in the future. So thank you so much, Tara and Marty. And before we start heading out, and as well as if there's anyone that has any questions, definitely please put them in the chat. We have time for maybe like 1 or 2 audience questions. I want to highlight the importance of, and the difference that being a part of Northwestern Mutual had for Tara, right? Just having that support system, having that backing. And then there's other resources that they offer to the New York Tech Alliance community. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat. So if you want to learn more about the opportunity to work with Northwestern Mutual, you can head on over to the website link that I put into the chat. And if you are watching the replay, it's going to be in the description below the YouTube video. So thank you so much. And everyone, there will be a replay for folks that are watching live, and let us know your thoughts and your feedback. And if you have questions, folks that are watching the replay. But this was a really amazing conversation. Again, the next event that we're having as the New York Tech Alliance is going to be on July 22nd at noon. That is our monthly meetup, where we have various founders, 2 to 5 founders come on, and they share a little bit about their business. They do a demo, and then we have any questions from the audience, as well as just an opportunity to know who's out there and what they're building. Since we've gone virtual, the pitches don't have to be from a company that is based in New York. It would be nice to have that. But if you're based in California, the Midwest, wherever you're based, definitely apply to be a part of that New York Tech Meetup Demo Day. And before we head out, I want to just present to Marty as well as Tara the opportunity to share any, an ask as well as an offer that you may have for the New York Tech Alliance community. So I guess, go ahead, Marty, first, and then I'll
jump in. So my ask is, I'm always looking for amazing founders. So if you are one, or one, especially specifically around fintech, insurtech, health and wellness space, and then because everyone's talking about these days Web3, blockchain-based technologies, we love where those things kind of converge. So if that's you or someone would love to chat with them. And then that's the ask, and then the offer is kind of related to that. If that is you or someone injecting you with non-dilutive capital, giving you resources on the data science research, even product design side. And then there's even available space for those in New York. We can carve out, a few cubicles for a small team. And we're down here at One World Trade Center.
Thank you so much, Marty. And you, Tara?
Yeah, just want to, I guess, ask people to please, any founders interested, connect with Marty. Like I said, it's been a tremendously valuable and fruitful and enjoyable relationship working with you over the last year. So thank you again for everything. I will say another offer is if you'd like to, talk to me about my experience, or, I'm pretty much an open book. I'm especially here to help female founders, underrepresented founders, help you all get a leg up. That's kind of like my whole shtick. So if you want to reach out to me, please do. I will drop my, I can drop my LinkedIn in the chat real quick, in case anybody wants to connect with me here. And let's see. So there's my LinkedIn if anybody wants to reach out directly. And then the only ask that I have is if you're interested, in what we're building with Reason, if you want to be somebody who invests more intentionally to be able to assign investments to certain goals and kind of be on the ride with us, what I hope is a very long, big ride that we will have, then please go to reason.app and sign up for our waitlist. As I mentioned, we will be launching in the App Store in a very short timeframe in July is the goal. And we might be bringing on a few more folks to test some things ahead of time. So you might get even more of a sneak peek than when it actually goes into the App Store. But yeah, would love your support there and for you to test out the app and let us know what you think. Oh, Georgianne, you're on mute.
I realized we're active. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tara. And Marty, if you want to go ahead. Oh, you already did. Put your LinkedIn into the chat. So that's how you are able to contact them. And if you're watching the replay, I know you're not getting these links, so we're going to definitely have them in the YouTube description. So don't worry about that. But I want to say another final thank you to everyone that showed up today, everyone that's watching the replay, and a big, big thank you to Tara and Marty for sharing your expertise, your insights, and your resources with us and the New York Tech Alliance community today. We really, really appreciate it. And we'll see everyone at our next meetup. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks especially to some friends of mine that joined that are still on here. Thanks for the support. And to Mary A, you were the most engaged in the whole chat. So love it. Appreciate the authenticity there as well. It's always good to be speaking to an audience that is talking back to some, in a good way. Yeah, in a good way. Exactly. So thank you.
All righty. Have a good one, everyone. We're going to close out the session.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.